Resha, thank you so much for this very nice introduction. I want to thank you particularly and Geneviève for hosting us and being part of this wonderful event. Although we are in the end of the program practically, but I'm very happy to see so many people, and I'm very happy also to have a lot of my friends, personal friends amongst you, and I feel like I'm at home. So I hope this encounter will be a casual one. It's going to be a casual one, and I'm going to be going through a lot of phases of my career now that I've almost been working in art for 45 years, so you can maybe guess my age a little bit, but and I'm very privileged to be here with Yazid, a very good friend of mine and my colleague and my ex-student, and we've collaborated a lot on a lot of works together. We work very closely together in the arts and we get along very well. So thank you, Yazid, for being here and partaking in this. Thank you.
My pleasure. Today's talk or conversation would be based on several interventions of Vera as an artist, as a curator, as a community activist, and as an educator as well. So most of our conversation would really be sort of revolving around these benchmarks in her life, and I will start maybe to introduce Vera and read a short biography about her, so you really sort of know the history of Vera before we engage in the conversation. Vera Tamari was born in Jerusalem. Her undergraduate degree in fine art was from Beirut College of Women in 1966. She specialized in ceramics at the, this is difficult by the way now, Istituto Statale d'Arte per la Ceramica in Florence. That's so difficult. That was in 1974, 1 year before I was born, by the way. And obtained an MPhil degree in Islamic art and architecture from the University of Oxford in 1984. She served for more than 2 decades as professor in Islamic art and architecture, in addition to art history at Birzeit University, where she also founded and directed the virtual gallery at Birzeit University, and then also she established the Birzeit University Museum in 2005 and till 2010. She is the founder of Cities Exhibition, which is a very important series of exhibitions that takes place in different cities. It would be really nice to talk about it later on.
In which we collaborated in more than one edition. Yazid helped me, and we worked together on several editions together.
And she's been working with so many institutions and on the board of so many institutions. One of them is RIWAC, Center for Architectural Conservation, and also in the International Academy of Art Palestine. She's on the board of the academic board. And she's also contributed in the Young Artist Awards of the Qattan Foundation, Yaya, and she helped a lot to organize so many cultural events and academic programs. I mean, she helped the municipality a lot, and she worked with so many NGOs and civil society organizations. She's also part of the jury of so many regional institutions, such as the Arab Foundation of Arts and Culture. And her specific art is specialized in ceramic sculptures, conceptual art, and she exhibited widely from 1974 up till now in the Arab world, worldwide, Europe, UK, Japan, and the US. I remember visiting Vera as a child. When I was a child, my father, because he's also a Palestinian artist, and he used to go and visit Vera, and he would really park the car underneath a big carob tree near Vera's house, and we would go down the stairs to the garden and then go up to her flat. And I still remember her mother sitting on this chair, and then she has her comb. She's really beautiful, very elegant, always with red lipstick, and her hair is really well done. And then she has the comb and the mirror beside her, and she's really spoken very elegantly and eloquently. And for me, that is the earliest memory of Vera. So maybe I would really start by asking you to talk a little bit about your family. Her family is actually, she's born into a family of many creators. Vladimir Tamari, a very notorious Palestinian artist who's based in Japan. He's a physicist and an inventor. Tanya Tamari, she's an author, a writer, and she's a singer, a classical singer, and she's also a cultural activist. So can you please tell us a little bit about your family background and your family members?
That's a long story. I'll try to make it very short because I was really privileged to be born in a family of art and culture. And since our childhood, we were always exposed to this love of beautiful things and understanding of our environment and looking at things. I remember very much as a child how my mother and father used to take us on trips to flower picking. The picture on the right is with my brother and sister, Tanya and Vladimir. We were picking anemones in the hills of Ramallah. And the other one is also with my parents. Faik is the gentleman sat next to the car, and my mother is on the other side of the... My mother, Margot Tamari, I will talk a little bit about my parents and their love for the arts. My mother, who graduated in the 20s from the Notre Dame de Sion in Jerusalem, had a special interest in philosophy and art and continued after she graduated from the school to take a year of art with some of the nuns. Then she established a small workshop in Jaffa where she used to do very beautiful objects, and she even enrolled at the time in a course, in a correspondence course called, with a school in Paris called École ABC. And that was very rare for a young woman her age in Jaffa at that time. And she used to send they used to send the devoirs that she had to do, drawings and exercises, and she would send them back by boat, I'm sure, through the post. And that's how it went. And she would get all the materials from France and get them into Jaffa so that she will do her work. My mother was an exceptional woman until the very end. She was always guiding us as children in understanding the beauty of nature and the love for colors. And she even had a huge knowledge of art. Till the very end, she was always my main critic in my art. I would always go back to her, even at the very, very old age where she couldn't even speak. I would show her a work, a ceramic piece, and she would either say, or she would, or nod in the other way. My father, on the other hand, was also, although he was a businessman, he was also a lover of the objet d'art. He always loved to buy antique things. Although he was a simple businessman, he didn't have a big business or money, but he loved putting his money into beautiful things which surrounded us all through our life. And of course, that affected us all, Tanya, Vladimir, and myself, as Yazid said, Tanya in her own way, and Vladimir, who are both very inspirational people to me and continue to be. We always communicate on our art together.
So Vera was my teacher at Birzeit University, and I still also recall when I used to go with my father to the Women's Training Center. It was an underwear school. And I remember Vera from there, but barely remember. I mean, it was it was in the early 80s, Vera. And I was less than 10 years, 70s even. Okay, then I was very young. So Vera, you've been an educator. You've been involved in so many academic institutions and academic program. Can you just tell us a brief about your involvement in, I mean, this is part of what you've did as an artist. So you were very much engaged in academia. Why did you do that and how did you do that?
Well, when I first graduated from Beirut, I came back. It was right after the war in 1967, and I came, and the only opportunities for young women my age was to be a teacher, and I didn't like that very much. But slowly, as I was involved, I went to a teacher training center, the picture with the women here, the young women, and they were almost my age. They were just graduated from high school, and we were, and I didn't have any fundamentals of teaching, but I developed a way of getting, they would resist being being in the art section because actually they were not very good in the other subjects, so they dumped them in the art section, and they resisted and they cried, and I told them, you're not going to be, you don't have to be artists, you have just to enjoy nature, to enjoy what's around you, to understand, to get a feeling of what's around you. And slowly we went along and did a lot of experimental work. It was a very challenging period for me, and I learned a lot from that period. I often would take them to the villages and the camps to study the crafts, the Palestinian crafts that were waning away, had started to wane away, so that they will become part of their teaching system as well.
What about Birzeit University?
At
These are the images of Birzeit.
Then when I graduated from Oxford in Islamic art and architecture, I went to Birzeit, and I also started teaching at the architecture department where Yazid was a student. And the first time he came to my class, Yazid started calling me Auntie Vera. And I told him, Yazid, please, for heaven's sakes, don't call me Auntie Vera. Call me anything you want, but not Auntie Vera, because I knew him since he was very young. And it was a pleasure to have him and all these very bright young people in the architecture. I taught art history, and I taught visual communications. And again, it was very experimental and very rewarding for me to teach, because I was learning a lot. All along, I was learning a lot. So it was this kind of exchange with young minds that gave me the energy to continue.
This is me, by the way.
That's why we called me Auntie.
Well, Vera managed to bring so many important people to Birzeit University. She managed to bring people like Kamal Ballata, for example, Samia Halabi, Emily Jasser. I mean, we became friends through Vera. I mean, when she came first to give workshops at Birzeit University, so I became good friends of her with, and also Marwan Qassab Bashi, who donated lots of his work to the university through Vera because of Vera's there. So can you tell us about the artistic environment that you created with the students within the university campus?
At Birzeit, they didn't have an art faculty, and it was I was the only one very close to the art scene at Birzeit University. So anything that was involved art, I had to be the consultant for whether to accept this collection, whether to hang this exhibition in this way, and I was always the reference. It was a pleasure for me, but I mean, it was the beginning. It was the very beginning. But my work, particularly with the students, as I said, who had such a very vivid mind. They were all very, very smart students, brilliant. I mean, it was always teaching them always gave me an energy and a creative energy to think more of what how personally I can grow as an artist as well. And till now, I'm privileged to see a lot of my ex-students being in prominent positions in different institutions in Ramallah. Yazid has sort of blossomed into a very wonderful art activist and art maker, and a lot of people in Riwak and other institutions have been my students, and I feel very privileged and proud to be part of it.
Actually, I would like to talk about these two images. So the one on the left is a workshop. This is Vera's visual communication room at the university, and we used to call it Vera's room. These are architects working with Samia Halabi. She's in black in the middle of the table, and on the right side, it's the image of the students of the Department of Architecture who worked with Vera on, you see the works behind her. These are the works with Vera in visual communication class that was done in an exhibition called Ayyam al-Amara, the Architecture Days. And Vera's work was really a major part of that annual exhibition. And these other exhibitions, maybe Vera, you can talk about both these particular experiences.
We shouldn't linger so much on those, but like I said, at Birzeit University, I was able to introduce to my students very contemporary ideas in the arts. And because, as you know, all know, in Palestine, there wasn't this kind of communication with the art world for a long period. Now it's becoming thriving, but at that time, through the art history class, I was able to introduce a lot of information about the different schools, the different activities that are going on in the world. On the right-hand side, it's an installation that my students did. It's like a take on one of the conferences, the Madrid conference, and they had people sitting around headless. But all dressed up in different costumes and sitting with the Coca-Cola bottles, boxes. And the others were sculptural works that the students did. We did exhibitions every once in a while, and they were very good. This is part of my involvement in the art collections at Birzeit University. Again, because I was one who had a little more knowledge about the art, they threw on me the responsibility to look after some very important collections that started coming to the university as presents. On the right-hand side, there's a wonderful collection, a unique collection by a Dr. Tawfiq Kanaan, who was a doctor in the early 20th century. And he accumulated a huge number of amulets, and he studied those amulets, and he recorded them, and his family later on donated this collection to Birzeit University. So I was privileged to be working on that collection and to register it. And on the left, there's a painting by Marwan Qassabashi, who also donated 75 of his work. Marwan recently passed away, and we felt sad that he couldn't come to Palestine to honor him in the proper way. In 2005, I established, because of the work was growing and the collections were coming in, I established the Birzeit University Museum. And this first exhibition at the museum was the Stateless Nation, which is an exhibition that Sandy Hilal and Alessandro Petti did at the Venice Biennale, and ours was the second leg of the tour of the exhibition. We did it in Birzeit University, so that was quite an avant-garde thing to do, and people loved it. This is inside the museum early on. We had both ethnographic and very important art exhibitions. And this exhibition I curated maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It's called Framed Unframed, about the representation of women in Palestinian art. And here's a work by Mona Hatoum that she donated to us. And the dresses are by Mary Touma. And the one in the bottom, the picture, is a performance by a Palestinian artist called Raeda Saadeh, who did a wonderful performance with this white dress. And you can see the student participation around her in the performance. It was on campus. Now you can talk about it.
Well, this is the second edition of Cities Exhibition. I was invited at that time by Vera Tamari to co-curate the exhibition with her. Vera started Cities Exhibition with an exhibition about Jerusalem. And it was more into the direction of ethnographic sort of reading to the families of Jerusalem at that time. And then when she invited me to the second edition, Ramallah, the fairest of them all, ? It was a critique to Ramallah. We decided to sort of merge her direction of ethnography with my direction into public intervention, where art really become a part of the city. So we've done a wonderful exhibition that was partially inside the exhibition space of Birzeit University Museum, and the other part is public interventions, one of them in Cinema Al-Walid, as you heard today. It was just before the cinema was destroyed. Inas Yassin, which is now the current director of the museum, has done an installation sound installation that has, she invited people to come to the cinema to watch the last film in the cinema, which was there projected in the 70s, and she invited people through poster, reprinting the poster of the film and inviting them for free to come to the cinema. And when the owner of the cinema found out, he was terrified and he was very angry, and he barricaded the whole cinema with corrugated white sheets. And Inas managed to insert the sound installation, so when people arrived to the cinema in front of the barricaded corrugated sheets, they thought that the film is playing inside because they can hear the sound. So some of them tried to open to break the sheets and go inside until the police came. And then some people were singing some of the songs in that film. So she created a sort of a movement around the cinema. And next day it was full in the newspaper about the importance of cinemas, etc., etc., etc. So May Aoudeh today reminded me with this very important project that was part of City's exhibition at that time.
I think with the city's exhibition, I think a new direction also in the art scene started coming through. I'm sure there were other very contemporary artworks being done, but art in the public spaces, like was introduced by Yazid and myself in the Ramallah and in the Nablus exhibitions, and later with Yazid in Jericho, were truly a new change and direction in how art could be also in public spaces, and that art can be a critical tool for people to question and understand issues rather than just be an observant and a passive observant.
This is a very important project, which is the virtual gallery, and maybe Vera, you can talk a little about why the genesis of this project and why it was really important for you to create that.
I'm not a technical person, but I was also aware that through the internet, one can reach all sorts of venues outside Palestine and within Palestine. And since I was teaching art history and being responsible for the museum, I was thinking that a lot of people will not be able to enjoy these exhibitions because they cannot come from Gaza, they cannot come from Bethlehem because of the roadblocks and all the barriers that the army was putting. So I thought maybe we can do something through the internet. It was a new thing. It was in 2005, I think, around that time, I think, as well. So I started with this idea of the virtual gallery at Birzeit University, which was a way of introducing Palestinian art to the general public inside Palestine and outside the world, and also in hosting exhibitions that took place by Palestinians outside, whether in the Arab world or in Europe or wherever they were. So, and we developed this website and became a very important reference to a lot of people, since there wasn't any kind of similar reference about Palestinian art and accessible. And it's still on. It's being now changed into an updated, and I hope it will continue to be used as such. But it was a very nice and pioneering work, and I remember Fabienne for Maserati used to go to the website to look at references if she wanted to know about artists, etc.
Another dimension of Vera's life, it's since the 70s, Vera was really engaged in so many community-related activities in theater and also in the creation of certain institutions. So maybe you can tell us about you and the theater and Balaline, because nowadays this theater group has really become very sort of an attraction story to younger generation, and at least I know a group now is really referring to that time and trying to recreate the theater in a different way that has been produced by Balaline. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
My minor in college in Beirut was drama, so I was involved in the theater, in a new kind of theater in Palestine, led by Francois Abu Salem, and the group was called Balloons. And it was very experimental, whereby there was no script to the play, and the actors more or less relied on an extemporaneous relationship with the audience. And I worked a lot backstage and in the development of the production and painting the scenes, etc. It was very pioneering work, and it led other groups to take on, and then maybe another group came out and it called itself Dababis, which means pin needles, to burst the balaline, the balloons that we created. So there was kind of a competition at that time. Another project I was involved in is the Children's Center in Ramallah, in the Ramallah Library. Again, it was very pioneering work. It was an activity center for children outside the schoolwork, after coming back from school. And it was led by Munir Fashi and a group of people who were all the time volunteering. It was a time of voluntary work. Everybody was involved in voluntary work in the 70s in Palestine. So this project was especially geared towards children, to give them the opportunity to express themselves in a creative way, in whatever. I mean, they were having games, they were having mathematics in a creative way, they were having drama and drawing, and all of us who were leading that program were professionals in our field, and we were working with the children, and it was a very beautiful project to have. Unfortunately, it stopped after a while. And
they blamed them. I mean, the municipality kicked them out, and they told them that you kicked out because you're communists.
And none of us was a communist then, but anyway. This is, again, the first, I mean, I was involved with the League of Palestinian Artists for many years, and I participated in a lot of their exhibitions locally and internationally. I was one of the few women artists in that group. They were all young male artists. So at one point, a group of women artists in different disciplines decided to make an exhibition which we called Tallat, Outlooks, and we held it in Jerusalem. That was the first well-curated exhibition, I must say, at the time. And the League of Artists were a bit jealous of us, why this exhibition was so well-planned. And it was just because we wanted to plan a good exhibition and not put any old painting on the wall.
One of the most important, I think, important times in the history of contemporary art in Palestine is the time of the new visions. It's upon the Intifada, the first Intifada, 4 artists, namely Slimane Mansour, Vera Tamari, Taysir Barakat, and Nabil Anani, decided to do something against occupation because of the Intifada. They want to partake in that kind of social upheaval that happened in Palestine. And what they did is they tried to boycott because most of the art equipment and paints and all the material that they use was really brought from Israel. So they decided to boycott all the material and decide to go to nature and find things from nature that really can substitute that material. So each of them went to a direction, and it was a new, for me personally, I think it was really a new era that really opened up to a more contemporary practice in Palestinian art, whereby instead of the villages are rendered inside the painting, So the painting is a representation of the Palestinian village. What they did is that they brought material from the village and they inserted in painting. So there was a different way of looking of painting as a representation and painting as part of the subject of the drawing of the painting. And I think by that, there was a big transition in opening up for more contemporary art practices.
I must interrupt you here. It's very important, that period was very important because being part of the League of Palestinian Artists, there was a long period in the 70s where all the artists were producing art which was directed towards the Palestinian struggle and the liberation of Palestine and the political art. And it was what we termed committed art. I mean, if you wanted to paint a flower in a vase, it wasn't accepted as art. You had to do something related to the rootedness of the Palestinians, the women, the fertility of the land, the struggle of the soldiers, of the Fidaiyin, of the freedom fighters, the breaking of the chains. So there were lots of symbols involved in the production of art in the 70s and 80s. There was a time when there was such a repetition in those terms and themes that the four of us, I think it coincided that the four of us felt we wanted to break away. It's like a mutiny against a form that was becoming stale and for us not satisfactory. So we went and made this group. And some of the artists were inspired by the land material. Others were inspired by new techniques. I mean, before that, it was the framed painting that was the only thing that's being produced. As you see here in the works of Yazid Anani in the picture on the left, you see that the form of the painting is taking a more sculptural shape. The frame is taking a more sculptural shape. More work has been produced in three-dimensional works. And that was all preceding the more contemporary trends that later on came to substitute for all of this, which was the installation art and the video art. But this was the first step as a break away from the more conventional art forms. The four of us also felt that we need to establish a very nice, there were no galleries, no museums. We were all the time before exhibiting in schools, in halls belonging to societies, in municipalities, and there wasn't a specific hall or gallery that would host our exhibitions. We thought of creating a center that had a beautiful feeling to it and a very professional feeling to it, and it was Al-Wasiti Art Center in Jerusalem, in an old house in Jerusalem. This was one of the opening exhibitions. It was called from, what is it called here? From Jerusalem? This is the second exhibition. The first one was from exile to Jerusalem, and involved the works of Palestinian artists who are in exile outside Palestine who couldn't exhibit. So we invited Kamal Bullata, Vladimir Tamari, Ibrahim Jabra, who was still living. It was a very important exhibition, that one. This was the second one where we had people from the Galilee.
Was it confiscated?
There were a lot of course, there were lots of Israeli not confiscations, but they would come and stop the exhibition for a while, and we had to negotiate, and they had to look at the works and accept the works or not accept the works. So it was always a struggle to put up these shows, whether in Jerusalem or outside.
And now the Maserati with Fabian.
Maserati is, I was very privileged to be working closely with Fabienne Verstraeten and Leila Shahid in putting up this wonderful cultural event in Brussels in 2008. And it went on for several months, whereby a lot of art activists, art creators, musicians, poets, literary people were involved in the very rich program which Fabienne developed in Maserati, in Brussels. And part of the programs also went back to Palestine. The idea was to do programs which were sustainable and that would be carried on later on in Palestine. Some of them did work, went on. So this is the group of people who were in the Maserati with Slimane Mansour, I can see Jack Persekian, myself, and Fabienne is in the picture. No, Jumana Aboud, other people.
And I remember partially it was there's a collaboration between La Cambre in Belgium and also in the Department of Architecture that went on for at least 2 years. And Riwaq Center for Architectural Conservation was also involved in a program through Maserati. So Maserati has not only been an event, but also it was really an extended collaboration between Belgian institutions and also Palestinian institutions.
And we were, just a little remark, I mean, Fabienne was expressing to me yesterday how happy she was to see that this event here in Marseille at Mucem is like an extension, it's like a continuation of that spirit of Maserati, which was one of the first major cultural events that took place outside Palestine. And this is, again, a continuation, and we're very happy that there is this kind of attention.
Vera, the artist now.
We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, finally. Also, one of the memories that I have going down to her studio at her house, and there's, clay, lots of clay on the floor, and she would really ask me to help her and knead the clay. And she's really, I remember her wearing this denim blue overall, and she was working, and her hands are so full of clay. And I mean, these are early memories of Vera. So Vera, can you tell us more about your work in ceramics and pottery and clay in terms of, what were the themes that you were so much interested in, and how did you sort of knead and shape the ceramics and clay that you worked with in order to convey these ideas and themes?
My introduction to clay came earlier when I was teaching at the Teacher Training Center, and I was taking my students to a village near Ramallah called Sinjal. It used to be Saint-Gilles. It's a crusader's name. And there was a woman called Musa who was an expert in building pots, handmade pots for use, for domestic use. And I was fascinated by the earthiness of the material in which she worked, and how it was part of her. She took out the clay from the environment. She took the colors in which she painted the pots from the environment, and she sat on the doorstep of her house outside on the rocks, and she was working, and with a natural rhythm of a woman. It was part of her life. It was part of her everyday thing. And I was very impressed with that, and how clay could be shaped into making pots. I became interested in pots through making pots through a workshop I did in England very early on, and that's how I chose it as material to work with, and I loved it because of its malleable quality. It is flexible. You can shape it. You can color it. It was a bit difficult for me in the beginning because I was the only person who was doing studio artwork, and not like a Musa who was doing it and firing her work in a pit that she filled with things which she gathered from around the house. But I was using the more studio artist techniques, and there wasn't somebody in Palestine as a reference for me. So it was a challenge. I worked at it all by myself. I developed my own techniques, and then I went and specialized in Italy, and I came back with more knowledge. Other than my wheel work, I started doing relief works, bas-reliefs, and in the beginning, my themes were very much inspired by the village women whom I saw before while going around with my students, and their way of working together. It was a community kind of interaction between each other, and their forms were naturally part of their themes. This is a big relief that I made for the Notre Dame Hotel. It's a mural. It's a village scene around it, the seasonal activities that women and men did in Palestine during the harvest. I also dealt with more political issues relating to women, as a woman, as a woman who endured the throes of occupation and lost her children. She was struggling to run out of that situation and to liberate herself. Women were also in the more abstract forms that I did, which were inspired by the landscape, I call them, the one on the left is called Winter Icons, and it is, you can see from the form, is both the form of the mountain and the ridges of the mountain, and yet it's the form of a woman's bust. The same is on the left. On the right. Again, the woman and the olive tree. The woman and the olive tree have always been in association with one. I saw in the trunks of the woman, of the olive tree, the woman's body and the woman's movement. This is a painting on fabric which I did called A Dance, and that's a diptych. And it's made with inks and collage and applique of fabrics together with the painting. Memory. You want?
About the I remember also once telling me that you've worked with an artist called Sophie Ernst. And Sophie Ernst managed to sit with you and Tanya and sort of massaged your memory about your grandmother's house in Jaffa. Can you tell us more about this and also your work with the issue of memory?
Well, it's not of course, memory. I mean, I was a very small child when my parents left Jaffa in 1948, were expelled out of Jaffa in 1948. But going back to Jaffa has always been a point whereby I felt a very important thing to do, because I wanted to connect with the place, which I wasn't brought up in. I was too small to remember. So before talking about Sophie's project, we had a lot of photographs at home from the pre-48 period, which my father had kept. And I always looked at these images and thought of the amazing sense of community that the Palestinians had before their dispersal into all parts of the world. They had their family activities, their picnics, they had their pictures taken at all sorts of occasions, and I was fascinated by this closeness and this naturalness of being in their own milieu. So I developed a series of relief works inspired by those pictures. Inspired by those relief works. On the left, you can see a picture of my father. He's on the extreme left with his friends and family picnicking in Hebron. All the ladies with him are either his sisters or cousins or friends. And even you can see the joie de vivre kind of life that the Palestinians led. I mean, there were, of course, wars and threats of wars, but Palestinians had this kind of thing. So I did relief works in clay being inspired by those pictures. The one on the right is one of them. Later we can see. The one on the left is after a picture of my mother before she got married. And I wrote a very beautiful essay about this because she had, before she got married, I found a little piece of scrap of paper in an amulet, which she had folded the day before her wedding, and maybe at the time where the picture of this relief was taken. And she said in beautiful French, beautiful, je suis dans ma chambrette pour la dernière fois à Jaffa, quelque chose comme ça, and je ne sais pas ce que l'avenir va m'offrir, mais je suis confiante. It was a very touching little statement, and she had folded this paper it was dated the 15th of May, and she was married the 16th of May. It was from her diary. So I made an installation building on that picture and that a little piece of it. The other one is of a picture from Beirut. We went to Beirut for 1 year after 1948, and then all the Palestinians from Jaffa were meeting in Brumana. And this is one of the pictures taken when we were in exile. This is a house. Maybe it's after my grandparents' house, and a reminiscence of the house which Yazid mentioned. An artist called Sophie Ernst, she's Dutch. She did a beautiful project, and whereby she asked some artists to try and reconstruct the house which they had left. Or, of course, Tanya and myself, my sister and I, we didn't remember the house so well. I mean, I didn't remember except for through pictures, or maybe through visiting Jaffa once after it was accessible to us after 1967. So as we were supposed to be drawing the map, the plan of the house. So we started by talking about the veranda and what was behind, what was in the garden. And going into the house, as we talked, we started drawing the rooms in the house. And by the end, we managed to draw all the interior of the house, and it became like a reality to us. The house of my grandparents, which they left in Jaffa. It was a very emotional moment for us, because building the plan slowly, and she was remembering, Tanya was older than me, remembering the objects that were in each room, the piano here, there was a vase, there was a room where my grandfather had his icons and this and that. It became a very emotional task for us, and we both cried at the end. It was a very lovely experience. I also got inspired in my work by history. History and archaeology are also a big interest for me. So I incorporated in a lot of my works, on the left-hand side, it's called Rhythms of the Past. I incorporated pieces of pottery which were found in nature, in Palestinian countryside. The same I did with the pottery, with the pots which I made. I used them as decoration on the pots, on my pots. They came, and again, memory is always there. The memory of how my ancestors, what they left behind. This is an installation I did called Oracles from the Sea, and it's about my ancestors who are from Jaffa, and they're coming out from the sea and telling the story of Jaffa and what they left behind. And the masks are classical. They're not in any resemblance to anybody in my family. It's just the form of ancient faces. And I took the installation to the Sea of Jaffa on the bottom picture, and I installed the faces there, and that again was a very emotional moment for me, because they were moving with the wind. The rods was moving with the wind, and you could see the sea from behind them and the waves going back and forth, and it was a beautiful moment. So a lot of Palestinian artists, I mean, that's not me only, have dealt with this issue of memory, of reflection on what was lost and what we lost behind, to keep this in our lifetime. This is an installation called Hilane's Curtain, and it's after an embroidered needlework curtain that my paternal grandmother did of. It's a curtain filled with little motifs from gazelles and chicken and birds and flowers, etc. It's all needlework, and the theme was Jerusalem for that particular exhibition, and she was from Jerusalem, and I wanted to do something about my grandmother, although I never knew her, but I always knew that she was a very stern, traditional woman who didn't have a lot of humor, who was very strict. And I looked at this beautiful curtain which she made, and I found it magical. And for me, my grandmother, Hilani, and Jerusalem have the same austerity. Jerusalem is an austere city, yet it has a lot of magic around it. So these are light boxes in which I put the motifs of inspired from the curtain, and they had lights flickering all around, going around like a Christmas tree. And I found, interestingly enough, I found a picture which I have here. A picture of my grandmother sitting on that chair, which we still have at home, and doing the needlework. So I put them all in one installation.
Nature has always been something that, as a student of yours, Vera, you've always been so much keen on taking us to look at nature in a different eye. I remember one of the exercises, you asked us to cut a frame and just throw it in nature, and then look inside that frame and see how much the details of nature in a miniature dimension within the frame is really making beautiful patterns and relationships and colors. So we started thinking about nature in a different eye and from a different perspective, and looking at the details that normally we ignored. So can you tell us more about your landscapes and your fascination?
I wanted you to develop your own concept of landscapes, of your own little landscapes within that little frame. So I think that exercise also for me became very inspiring. It was just, I thought about it and it stayed with me. I like that exercise. For me, nature and the rolling hills of Palestine, and as I told you, we were always looking and enjoying the beauty of the landscape. Then the landscape started being exposed to more violence, and it became so torn, and I felt that I cannot always just paint the rolling hills in their beautiful manner they are, and the olive trees around them. And this is one of the works which has some kind of the violence that is attacking the breaking of nature, the settlements being built, the bulldozing, the new Palestinian settlements as well, destroying all the beauty of nature. For me, has been a very traumatic thing.
When was that?
That's an early one. It's in the 90s.
Okay.
That's made, the first one, that's made of ceramic reliefs and acrylic colors. It's like a wall piece. The olive tree has always been a theme, recurrent in my. I always love the olive trees. For me, are like women standing and protecting nature. They're standing there as guards in the fields. And I love the way they take on a very feminine role with all their curves and twisting and stuff like that. But again, the olive tree became a symbol for a lot of artists who wanted to portray the rootedness of Palestinians to the land. And I did a lot of works inspired by nature, the olive tree, in watercolors. This is an installation that I would like to talk more about. It was during the incursion on Ramallah in 2002, and we were under curfew. And I was going 5 minutes, and I was going down to my workshop. Going down to my workshop, I had to go out of the house and go down, and it was curfew, so I had to steal myself out of the house between the time that the tanks would pass by the house. If a tank would pass, I'd take the occasion and go down quickly and stay in the workshop. It was at a time when there was a lot of uprooting of olive trees as a punishment for Palestinians in the villages and for building the wall and for, and for putting up the settlements. So I sat in my workshop and I did a lot of, it was like a healing thing for me. I was doing these very small clay olive trees, and while shaping each tree, I would say, like a mantra in my mind, that for every olive tree that is being broken or being cut and brutally cut, I will create another tree. In the process, I did hundreds, like around 650 trees, and they were all colored. They were all colored to project the hope that the mother tree, which is above a natural picture in black and white, is giving out all these new trees for the hope for Palestine. One of my last projects was last year. I made a series of, it was a commissioned work, and I did a series of sculptures inspired by the seasons. Each one of them is representing, they're abstract, each one is representing a different season. The one on the right is summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Are we ending with this one?
Ah, yes.
We're ending with this major work that I did in 2002, again, as a result of the incursion in Ramallah. The Israeli tanks destroyed about 600 or 700 private cars in their driveways, on the streets, everywhere, as part of punishment for the civilians in the town. And I was looking at the street and seeing these cadavers, these carcasses of cars all over the place. And I thought I wanted to do an installation, so I built a road, and with the help of municipality and other organizations, we built a road in the football field next to my house. And I brought in some of these crushed cars and cleaned them properly. They looked very shiny. And I put radio installations in them, and I called the installation "Going for a Ride" with a question mark, as if people were going on promenade, in a street that had no beginning and no end, like all the streets that were in the West Bank with all the barricades and stuff like that. And eventually, the opening was that when this picture was taken, and that same night there was another curfew, and we couldn't see the installation. Nobody could, for 20 days, nobody could see the installation except for the army, who went back into the site, and recrushed the cars again. And there was a lot of transformation. Unfortunately, I didn't take pictures. A lot of transformation of the thing. Then eventually the little boys in the neighborhood started taking spare parts here and there. And so it had its own change of life as we went along. This was done in 2002. Maybe I can link my interest in putting up this installation to my first interest in drama, whereby you do a lot of dramatic production to put up a play. It's like putting a theater piece. Yes.
Well, maybe the final words. Vera is one of the few of her generation that opened up the opportunities for younger generation and really pushed them to the community and the cultural scene strongly. So many people working in so many places, younger generation, are really part of Vera's, were either students of Vera or were really encouraged by Vera. Yani I can call names you might know, yani Reem Fadda, for example, the Horiwaq Center for Architectural Conservation, Inas Yassin. There's so many people that are really active now in the cultural scene that are either the students of Vera or been pushed by Vera. And I think this is rare also in the generation of Vera in Palestine.
You kept me all very young. That's what's very important. And I really was being the energy that I got from my staying friends with all my ex-students is really what keeps me going. And I feel like we're not, the age difference is not an issue at all. We are good friends. I'm also moving into the new contemporary world with them, and with the ideas that they create. So it's a lovely interaction with my ex-students whom I cherish a lot. And I want to thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was so nice. Thank you.
For giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Real privilege.
And thank you, Yazid.